Hello, everybody. You are listening to 107.7 FM New Orleans United Public Radio. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. This is What the Frick Live. I am your host, Emily Menshouse, and I have Mr. Will Martinez from Dark Fringe Radio. Hello, Will.
Good evening. How are you?
I'm doing good. And if you're watching via Facebook, social media, yes, I do have sunglasses on because it's bright and sunny. Bright.
Yes.
That's my Kentucky accent.
It's bright.
It's bright up here in Kentucky. And I'm old, and my screen is touchscreen, and I can't see you all unless I have sunglasses on. But
You're the movie star
tonight. Yeah, it is. I have a star on Hollywood eventually one of these. Yes. I don't know if I want that or not. Maybe a star on in the bluegrass state somewhere in Lexington or Louisville or Frankfurt or Capital. But I do have blackout screens coming, so it will be better. It'll be as dark as Will's little background next week. Is those dark out?
Yeah, they are. Absolutely.
They are?
Yeah. Yep. I can't live without. Yeah, I can't live without blackout. Yeah.
Well,
Florida. It's if you don't, your house will go up to like 85 degrees. You know what I mean? In the middle of the day. You know what I mean? I mean, people from New Orleans will know what I'm talking about. It gets hot as hell over there as well. So yeah, you have to have blackouts here, definitely.
Well, I'm getting blackouts. Even though the sun is setting right now, I shouldn't have to have my sunglasses on much longer. But thank you everybody for tuning in. I know last week I had to cancel. My dog was super sick, but he's good. We got a good bill of health with him. Just awesome. Insulin adjustment, which is costing me now $800 a month. But my dog is family. I will pay it, and I'm hoping I can write it off on my taxes. I swear I'm going to put it down as medical expenses.
I don't blame you.
I am. I'm just going to see what they're going to happen. So if I go to jail for tax,
I don't think they're going to get you for the $800 bill for the dog. Right? Yeah.
It's my dog. It's my dog. So Will has the show, Dark Fringe Radio. If you don't mind to tell everybody, Will, tell a little bit about your show. What's going on over there?
Yeah, real quick. You can follow us at darkfringeradio.com. Last week we came out with an episode, Joe Greenstein, the Mighty Atom. We kind of featured a gentleman who was kind of like a circus performer, but ended up being like a strong man, and just kind of like a whole bunch of things happened to him throughout the life. A very interesting guy. He was able to do a lot of different things. So really cool, introspective look on that. And then tomorrow we have another new episode coming out with Andy Jang. He is actually the host of a podcast called Hidden Stories. So I've been trying to focus on helping new podcasts out that are just starting and feature them on Dark Fringe Radio since we've been on for a long time. So wanted to help out the new guys in the block and feature him. And he hosts this podcast talking about just crazy stories that's happened around the world, and stories he's heard from other people, secondhand stories, and just really interesting guests. So yeah, you can check us out, darkfringeradio.com.
Dark Fringe Radio is going around on the screen if you're watching via social media. It's in our description. So we are live tonight on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble. So if you're watching at any of these places whatsoever, please make comments. Make as many comments as you can, because that keeps us in the algorithm. If you're watching on Facebook, give us a heart, because hearts stay longer in the algorithm. I know this sounds crazy, but it's the truth. YouTube, give us that, what is it? Thumbs up? Thumbs up on
thumbs
YouTube?
Up. Yeah,
and ring that bell. And on Rumble, please give us a positive feedback there. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We love you. The viewers and supporters is really what's super important. But we also have a really super important guest this evening. We're going to deep dive. Maybe not even deep dive. I always say deep dive, or I think deep dive, and then we never get the questions I want answered. But this gentleman that's coming on, his name is Kyle Overmyer. He has a testimony and a half, but he was a sheriff in the Sandusky, Ohio, Sandusky County area, which is not too far from me. So this hits home because my area that I live in Kentucky, Ashland, Kentucky, Ironton, Ohio, Huntington, West Virginia. If you go over to Netflix and you watch Heroin on Netflix, it's a documentary. That's literally my town. And the brown bag ladies that's on this documentary goes to my church. So we have Kyle Overmyer on. He was elected sheriff of Sandusky County, located in Ohio. After dealing with a long-term inflammation disorder, Kyle became addicted to pain medications. He used his position as sheriff to help feed his addiction. The medicine helped numb the pain from life in law, which I believe that definitely there's a lot of trauma, law enforcement agent or police officer, and everyday stress. Kyle was eventually indicted by a grand jury of 42 related felony charges. He eventually pled guilty of 12 counts. He was sentenced to serve 4 years in prison. Kyle has turned his dark circumstances around for the good. He has now found his true passion to help those that are struggling with addiction. Kyle has been sober for 6 years. He works in recovery, a motivational speaker and advocate for first responders through KO, which means Knockout Addiction LLC. So let's bring Kyle onto the show right now. Hello, Kyle. You have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry. Welcome to the show. Can you hear us?
I'm not sure if he could hear us or not.
He was working fine just a second ago.
Yes, he was. Can you
He's
unmute?
Unmuted. He's unmuted on my end.
Oh, so he says he can't hear us at all. So
log out and log back in, if you don't mind.
I want to send him a message through the.
Okay, thank you. Here, I'm gonna kick him from studio. I kicked him out. Look at that. He's so dangerous. I can kick him out. No, he's not dangerous. But hold on, let me message him here. Log back in. That's what happens when you go live, people.
Yeah, you never know.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be able
like
to.
This.
Go ahead.
No, I'm really looking forward to this this interview because this is something that we start seeing a lot more of, unfortunately, and to be able to like kind of pierce the veil on something like this is quite interesting.
Allison's on here. She's one of Kyle's cousins, so she's super proud of us.
Wonderful.
Like these people have amazing testimonies. I've worked with a lot of addiction recovery over the years. We used to do, my brother and I used to do addiction recovery concerts in Huntington, West Virginia. We would sign almost 25 to 30 people up for recovery every year. But sadly, since COVID, we haven't done it since 2019 was the last year we've done it. And we've talked about starting it back up and things. We have Marshall Thundering Herd. I think I can take these off now. Yes. Oh, whew. Okay, I can see.
There she is.
There she is, Miss America. But anyway, we go up there, Marshall University, which is in Huntington, West Virginia. We've had a lot of concerts up there. My church too does a lot of outreach. But we kind of live in the armpit of America, where I'm at. It's true. We're like the number one most poverty-stricken area in the United States.
I am aware of that. Yeah, I'm aware of that. And I'm aware of the heroin issue there too. I mean, unfortunately, it's really taking over a lot of different communities, not just in, Kentucky, but all over the United States. I mean, it's just unbelievable what it's actually, how many people it's affected across the country. And, you're finding just like these small pockets of just, middle America, completely just crippled by people that are addicted to, pills, narcotics, fentanyl, all these new things that are out there now. It's just unbelievable. It's sad to see, unfortunately.
Oh, it's very sad to see because it doesn't just affect the addict, it affects the whole family. Like my brother and I never had an addiction problem or anything, but we have family members that have, and so it hurts the whole family. It goes beyond just the person that has that issue. So, and as family, I love my cousins, I love my aunts and uncles, and it's a true struggle. And to overcome it is a lifelong commitment too.
Yes,
it takes a lot.
I mean, I don't care what family you're from. I don't care where you're from either. I'm sure everybody knows somebody that's struggling from some type of addiction, whether it be drugs, alcohol, whatever the case may be. But it does affect the whole family because that the whole family does have to deal with that person at the end of the day. And so again, like what you said, it does affect the entire family.
So it affects the family. So how often, when we have these police officers and sheriffs and FBI and the CIA and all these people getting apprehending criminals that are dealing drugs or caught with a lot of drugs on them, how often does this affect the police officers and stuff behind the scenes?
Oh, 100%. I mean,
where does all these drugs go?
Well, they're human beings too, at the same time. I mean, yeah, where do these drugs go? That's the question that you asked. But, we've seen, there's been occasions where, the police have, taken their fair share of maybe the evidence and dispersed it amongst themselves in some way or fashion. And, again, when you have such a huge stranglehold of, drugs in a society, it's so hard not to have corruption. It's almost impossible, really, if you really think about it. Because again, we're all human beings at the end of the day. The people that are, securing the law and making sure that things are supposed to be done the right way are falling victim to the same thing because they're human beings as well. So how do you combat that? That's the real question.
I mean, with my friends with addiction, I've combated it head on, headstrong, and I'm doing this, I'm doing this, I'm doing this. But ultimately, it comes down to the person.
Oh,
they
absolutely.
have to 100%. They have to do it themselves, And it's a long process. It's a long timeline of love, hate. You have to love somebody so much in some aspects to let them go. And I mean, some of my friends have been homeless over it. And you sit and you worry, but you have to actually turn yourself off to that. Hold on, Kyle's coming back on right now. Yay, we got our guest coming back on, koaddiction.org.
Okay, I got a different device.
All right.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problem. Okay. No problem at all.
We're filling in over here. It's all right. We got
That's
you.
all right. It's called improvise. That's what we do in life every day.
That's actually a very good, analogy. You're very right there, Kyle.
We improvise in life to navigate.
Because you never know what's going to be thrown at you, right, Kyle?
No. They always say that life throws you like curves, but you got to learn to swerve,
Yeah. You were dealt a very big curveball, my friend, weren't you?
Yes, I became a very good baseball player.
He was ready for anything that comes away. My son is coming in here. I'm sorry. He's here with me tonight. He's super excited.
Hey, Jet.
Jet, bend down a little bit.
That's my boy.
There we go.
Hi. Look at him. Look,
I bought
my boy.
him. I bought him gel blasters. Him and his friends are doing capture the flag and stuff tomorrow. It's been $200 in Nerf gel blaster stuff.
Jeez.
Oh, these hurt, by the way. I've heard 20 times.
But Jet wants to be in the military eventually one day.
No, I do not.
That's what you told me.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you did.
I'll be in the NBA.
Oh, he's going to be in the NBA.
Classic,
so here we go.
Classic.
The NBA now. He went from Navy military Jet.
I'm glad about that.
He went from pension to making big money. I get it.
There you go.
That's what it is. So, Kyle, thank you so much for joining What the Frick Live. We appreciate you. I did a small introduction, but if you don't mind, just to tell everybody that's listening and watching a little bit about your background.
A little bit about my background. I always say my elevator pitch, you get in the elevator and everybody never wants to talk to anybody. You know what I'm saying? But I always do. You got to get uncomfortable to get comfortable. So,
that's right.
No, my name's Kyle Overmyer. I started up a lot of speeches like this because I've had numerous titles over the years. I'm the former Sheriff of Sandusky County. I'm a father, a husband, an ex-husband, a stepfather, a grandfather, addict in recovery, and also I'm a felon too. And I'm kind of proud of that because I'm beating the odds now in life because, everybody says when you have that F behind your name, you can't move forward, and I'm beating the odds and we'll talk about that throughout the show.
Yes.
So that's a little bit about me at the beginning. And So whatever you want to ask me, I'm an open book. I'm honest and transparent.
I'm
Awesome.
gonna let Will start this out. If he doesn't
Oh,
mind.
okay.
Yeah,
Mrs.
I'm
O.
gonna let
Oh,
you do
okay.
this.
Yeah. This is
I'm gonna
audible
go
over here. Well, Kyle, thank you. I appreciate for you coming on the podcast tonight. Listen, I mean, what a curveball. We talked about this before the podcast started. You went from being a sheriff to being an inmate. I mean, I know that whole process was over a period of time. Can you bring me back to maybe the genesis of this, and maybe where you could maybe tell me where all this started? I know you became sheriff, and then you had developed a drug addiction problem.
Correct.
Tell me about that.
Well, I'll even rewind a little bit. I grew up in Northwest Ohio, called Fremont, Ohio. I was had the all-American life. Two parents that were married. They're still married over 50 years today. Father in law enforcement. Mother had a job in an office at a construction company. Went through all my grade school years, high school years. I went to a private Catholic school and played high school sports: football, baseball, basketball, a little basketball, not much. I'm a short guy, but then I focused on wrestling, and I was a boxer, which then the KO addiction comes in. So,
Your initials
and
too.
then
Your initials.
what's
It
that?
was meant to be. It's your initials too. So it's meant to be.
It is my.
Go ahead.
That's what's crazy. It is my initials, and I don't really have a middle name. So, I went onward and went to college for a couple years. I was an art major, and I paint and draw, but I didn't foresee myself as really doing anything and being able to financially support myself. So I dropped out, and then eventually followed in my father's footsteps and got in law enforcement.
Okay, so getting into law enforcement, following in your father's footsteps, of course. I'm sure you probably had this very grandiose picture of what being a police officer is and should be. Take me through that that process, and then getting to the pinnacle of your career as being a sheriff.
Well, I started back in 1996. I started at the bottom. I was about 21 years old when I started. I worked in corrections, moved my way up to road patrol, and quickly rose to detective sergeant, and then detective captain when I was 27, 28 years old, which is kind of unheard of, moving up that quickly. Yeah. And I found myself focusing in a drug interdiction when I was on the streets. And during that time, we had the crack cocaine epidemic that was, across the country, and it hit, Sandusky County, Fremont, Ohio. And I was out there chasing the bad guys, getting the, large amounts of drugs, guns, and money off the street. So the sheriff then recognized that, and he saw that there was a guy that maybe could eventually fill his footsteps and fill his boots, so to speak, and replace him someday. And eventually I even worked a little undercover with DEA, purchasing up to almost 20 kilos of cocaine from large organizations.
Is it Michigan? Does a lot of stuff up there, because you're in Sandusky, Ohio, does it come down through Michigan? Is that what you were facing, that kind of trafficking? Or
no, more or less up through from Mexico to Texas. We were dealing with the high Hispanic population. Yes, and we're between Detroit, Chicago, Cleveland, and there's just a multitude of people that come in that area and set up shop. So no, I worked in that capacity for a while. And eventually, the sheriff saw that someday that, like I said, I could, fill his shoes. And, we would talk on several occasions. And at 34 years old, it came too soon. He passed away. And before he could actually mentor me even more and groom me. So I was approached by actually the Republican Central Committee, which I was a member of then. And they said, "Hey, are you interested in running for sheriff?" I heard that, the sheriff was going to groom you. I had to go have a talk with then my wife, who I was married to in the past. And I had already had 2 children. I had a daughter, Michaela, and a son, Dylan, and they were very young at the time. And I had an opponent that had 30 years of law enforcement experience. So I took the big step and went up against him, and they had an immediate appointment. And I was victorious at the young age of 34 years old. Believe it or not, I was the youngest sheriff in the state of Ohio at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is a calling for you, Kyle. I think you went
Yeah.
through everything. I can feel it, even like talking to you. And we've messaged over time through Facebook. And William Steele was the one that was like, "You got to interview this guy," because William Steele's been on our show. And I think all of this happened for a reason, which I think most of the stuff, but it just depends on how you choose to react to your mistakes and own up to your mistakes. And then if you're going to help other people, which is a testimony, like there's power in your testimony to help other people. So when you're doing your sheriff duties, because I live in a low, I don't know, we call it the good old boy system is what we have here. So
the good old boy network.
The good old boy network. And
that's what we call it here in Florida.
The smaller the community, the more corruption it is. And I don't want to bring out the corruption because we got an amazing sheriff now in our district. I love him. I voted for him. He's awesome. His family, I've known him for a very long time, which I'm pretty sure a lot of people probably could say the same about you, Kyle, in your area. So does the good old boy system, when it comes to drugs and addiction and stuff, does that exist within the corporation or the body of police? If that makes sense. I don't know how to say it.
Okay. I think it did at one time. And I think, you know what, especially with social media today, and everybody's in everybody's business. You know, we got Big Brother watching us all the time, so to speak. So I think, there's, still a lot going on, but I mean, you got to keep it really on the down low, because if not, you're going to get exposed. Like I got exposed, and we'll talk about that. And with social media,
that was my next question. I was going to see if you teamed up with anybody within the department, or if somebody else knew about it, like, and they try to help you and like try not to catch you. That's why I said good old boy system. Like,
nobody knew about my secret of addiction. Nobody. I was a great actor, as well as you'll always find out. Addicts are great actors. They're great manipulators. They scheme and scam any way to feed their addiction. I was diagnosed about at age of 36, 37 with arthritis. This is how it all began. And I'd broken both of my ankles as a child, the childhood sports, and went to a doctor, and I was then prescribed 105 Vicodin a month. And that's how it all began.
Jeez.
That's how it all began.
That's
so 105 Vicodin. Yeah, that's 30 days. So how many Vicodin is that in a month? I mean,
so you got to take,
4 or 5 a month, a day,
2 to 3 a day.
Yeah.
So
2 or 3.
Yes, and as time went on, what happened then? We ended up having. I got involved with a fatal shooting that actually I was then sued for $20 million personally. Then we ended up. I took care of my guys, but I didn't take care of Kyle. So of course I struggled with not only the lawsuit, but actually the trauma of the incident. Then we ended up having 3 children drown in the mouth of the river one day. And, that weighed heavily on me as well. And I took care of the other guys, and never took care of myself with all the trauma and all the other things that I saw along the way of my 20-year career. So I then went out and began to doctor shop. I went in, numerous doctors, manipulated doctors, and graduated Percocets, because the Vicodins, after a while, they'd only last about 2 weeks for me, or a week and a half. I was taking copious amounts of to not only deal with the physical pain, but more of the mental pain. The mental pain became overbearing and far worse than the physical pain. And then, of course, I went from there to they had the pill take back box, old prescription. So I took it upon myself to not only collect, but put my hand in the cookie jar, and I fed my addiction that way. So I thought of any kind of creative way to feed my addiction, but try to, so to speak, mask it. And so nobody knew what was going on with me. I didn't want to go to the streets because all the drug dealers and the dope boys knew who Kyle Overmyer was. I was a sheriff. I worked in the undercover capacity. I was very visible in the community. So there, nobody knew. I walked around with a Kool-Aid smile all the time. Everybody thought I had the all-American life, married 2 kids, and living the life. And I was struggling and dying inside. And I wasn't taking care of Kyle. And that's how it all happened.
We have your cousin Allison on here saying she never knew. Like she said, we never knew.
No,
like,
nobody I saw.
Your wife or ex-wife didn't know? Nobody?
Nobody.
Wow.
Nobody ever knew. Nobody ever, suspected it. And then eventually, this is one of my turning points of my life. February 3rd, 2015. I go to the pharmacy where I always get my prescriptions filled, and I'll never forget. I went there, and Leslie, bless her heart, she's a good friend of mine now. She was pharmacist. She says to me, Kyle, I'm going to talk to you. Me being law enforcement, me being known for, drug investigations, I thought I was going to be tipped off about something. And she took me aside and told me it was over with. And I said, what's over with? She said, you're going to multiple doctors. You're red flagged. I'm going to call the doctors. You can no longer get opiates from multiple doctors. It's against the law. And that's where I got sick. I felt shame. I was worried. And I went home that day and I flushed my last Vicodin down the toilet and began to detox myself and get myself clean, which was very dangerous. And I had to, again, be a manipulator by when my wife then would go to school. She was a school teacher. My kids would go off to school. I could manipulate my schedule to look like I was going to work. And I'd come back and pull my vehicle in the garage and rest and try to sleep and get myself together on a daily basis to detox myself, to get myself clean. And, I wasn't taking narcotics anymore, but mentally I was still struggling. I was still struggling with the, disease of addiction, and that trauma and everything else was not going away for me.
So Kyle, how long did you do this then within the sheriff department? Like how long did you confiscate for your personal use?
I mean, I didn't start as an addict off the jump. Right. It took me, a year and a half, 2 years to start, but I mean, I had a several year addiction. I really did. And I was in denial. I was in shame. I thought to myself, how could myself, like Kyle Overmyer, not only a father, but a man that wore a badge and a uniform and protected and served, be an addict? No, those were the people that I arrested. Those were the people that I were, when I would kick in doors and trap houses and crack houses, those were the ones, not me. There was no way. So I could never look at myself in the mirror and say, Kyle, you're an addict at that time. I couldn't. But eventually we'll talk about it. I had to be that man to finally look in the mirror and realize that I am an addict,
So what
it takes
was
a lot for somebody to do that too, by the way. It takes a lot. It doesn't matter if it's heroin, cocaine, alcohol. It takes a lot. Kudos to you, Kyle, for finally hitting this battle head on. And it obviously is a blessing for your family, because Will and I were talking before you came back on, like, not only does someone, which you hit it pretty well, but I think over time you wouldn't have been able to hide it if you kept trying to go the route that you were going, because it affects family. The addict in the family affects everybody around them eventually. And you as a family member, because I face this, you've got to come to a point of like really having tough love. And a lot of that tough love comes to like, this person I've tried and tried and tried. I got to let them go. And I'm glad. Hopefully, I don't know, we'll hear some more. I'm going to have Will follow up with this, but nobody, from what I've heard right now, has not necessarily had to let you go, but you took this on. You took this giant on as yourself early, and you were able to confront it, and amazing. Yeah, awesome, Kyle.
Absolutely.
So go ahead, Will.
No, you're absolutely right, Emily. It's a huge testament to, I mean, trying to fix the right, the wrongs of what you're doing. And Kyle, let me ask you this. I mean, I know, that whole situation with the pharmacist, that was the beginning of kind of like the downfall, but what was the catalyst of when, like, what was the tip off of when, the department knew and your brethren knew about what was going on, and how did you deal with all that after?
Well, I thought it all went away. I had completed successfully, 2 4-year terms of running for sheriff successfully. You run every 4 years in the state of Ohio.
Right.
And I was coming up on my 3rd term, and I had an opponent in the primary. And ultimately, I got 62% of the votes. And of course, I was still clean, but still struggling mentally with this thing. And that, like they always say, those demons, they never leave. You just got to keep fighting them. And
That's right.
so I continued on, and then there were some rumblings, and I was contacted by my county prosecutor, and he said, Kyle, they're looking into you. They're starting to investigate you for narcotics and addiction with, getting multiple prescriptions. And I was still in denial. I said, they're out to get me. These people are out to get me because they want my job is what's going on. I just didn't want anybody to know about my.
So they were trying to use it as blackmail.
Right. So,
Blackmail.
and I said, they're trying to get, to my, I said, they just want my job. And I was in total denial. I didn't want anybody to know. And ultimately, I had 2 opponents. And on August 23rd, 2016, I was at the ribbon cutting for our county fair as the sheriff with all the judges, everybody. And I knew that they had gone for a special grand jury to
Right.
try to indict. So actually, I was in sheriff uniform in the morning, and by 6:30 that night, I was in an orange jumpsuit with a 43 count indictment, looking at 15 years in prison.
Wow.
How did you feel about that? Like, you are on one side of the spectrum, now you're going to be entering the other side of the spectrum. Like, how did you feel by that time, from early morning to the evening that night, and going to jail? Like, what anxiety? What was going through your mind?
I was still going to fight. There was even a newspaper article that came out that said Overmyer is going to fight, because that's what I said. I was a fighter, and I wasn't.
Were you in denial then? Was it
absolutely? I didn't want anybody to know about my dirty secret. No, I knew deep down inside I was an addict, but I wasn't about to go down without a fight. And so they took me in. I bonded out with a $150,000 bond, and I continued to run for sheriff. And
Wow.
And people were shocked. I talk about this a lot. I went out and I marched in parades. I did debates. I did everything under the sun. And we were even doing. I had a group that was doing polls, phone call polls, and my numbers were climbing. And people were still on my side. A lot of people supported me before. I done a lot of great things in the community, and they were still supporting me throughout this all, and I wasn't going to give up.
Allison, first, the demons of addiction, and I believe it's spiritual warfare too, Allison, really quickly, because demonic activity actually changes the person inside out and actually changes their appearance over time. And all of my friends that are addicted long term, they do not look like the same people that I knew even just a year or 2 ago, or even longer ago. She's saying that, but she also asked the question, who bonded you out?
Well, I put together the money with my sister at the time, and she helped me, and I of course ended up having the money, and ultimately I bonded out, and I got out and I kept rolling. I mean, I kept rolling hard, but then they really wanted to get me. And my son's birthday was coming up, and he wanted a crossbow for his birthday. He was 12 years old, and we had taken a hunter safety course together for hunting. And I get a phone call from my attorney saying, hey, did you buy a crossbow? I said, yeah, I did. They said, well, they're going to be serving you a paper. You're going to be going through a hearing. That's considered a dangerous weapon and you can't possess. I said, I don't even have it anymore. I took it over to my in-laws.
Mhm.
I don't care. So at that time, I went to take my son Dylan to school, and I'll never forget. It was November 3rd. He said, Dad, am I going to see you after school? Because he knew I was going to that hearing. I said, Dylan, still in denial, thinking I was Teflon. I got this, Dylan. I'll see you after school. Went to my hearing, and they found that I violated it, and they gave me a $250,000 cash bond, no 10%, no nothing. I had to come up with the money. I was locked down.
Wow. For a crossbow.
Correct.
So did you know the judge and all this? Did you have a relationship with him? Because I find out in my local area that a lot of the police officers and the Good Old Boys Club have really good connections with the judges.
She came in as she was a visiting judge they brought in who was retired that handled all high profile cases. So, and the process.
That's interesting. That's interesting. So, visiting judge. Is there somebody like maybe possibly like given a red flag that we might have a Good Old Boys system going on in the city? Why a visiting judge for you? Is it because you law enforcement?
Well, because of probably law enforcement, and they don't want to have a judge because I got along with the judges, in the community, but one that has already sent some people away in law enforcement. So they brought her in, and ultimately they put me in Marion County Jail, which is a jail over not too far from us. And that's where, honestly, I started to surrender to my addiction. That is where I'm like, you know what? I just told my son I would see him, and I didn't.
Okay.
I had a daughter, and I was a father, and I'm like, okay, it's time. I need to let everybody know what I'm dealing with and what I'm struggling with, and be a man instead of a coward. So I started to talk with my parents a little bit about what I was struggling with. I didn't really say too much with my wife then. And I started to write letters. I went to my first AA meeting while I was in jail. And I worked with my attorney and pled to 12 counts is what happened. And,
Pam Springer's watching too, by the way. I don't mean to interrupt, but the day I visited you in prison, you promised a great comeback. You didn't disappoint, my friend. So many people can relate to your story. I believe that too, Pam.
Pam's awesome. She's awesome. I appreciate her. She came to visit me. She was a probation officer too and supported me. And that's the one thing. There were so many people that jumped off the ship when it was sinking.
Yeah.
And guess what? They tried to come back. And I keep going. But to go back to the story, I pled to 12 counts, and December 13th, I went back and I asked for treatment. I needed treatment. And the judge told me she was going to give me the best treatment in the state of Ohio and sentenced me to 4 years in prison.
Okay, go ahead, Will. Go ahead.
So, oh boy. Yeah. Well, okay. So you get handed down the sentence, Kyle, and so are you going to prison at this point? That's where they're sending you?
I'm going to prison.
Okay.
I was going to state, not fed. No fed time, state time.
No fed time, state time. Okay.
That's different. That's different too.
Right. No, I know. And and state.
We got a federal prison in my city, by the way, where I live.
Yep, I know you do.
Yep. Okay, go ahead.
Okay,
I'm sorry, Will.
No, that's okay. So now you're going to state prison. So are you in a situation now where you're being put in a place where you put other people in that same place?
Yes, but I went and I got sentenced, and I talk about this, and I wasn't the greatest guy. I'm going to tell you this as well. I had a girlfriend at the time too, and on the day I was sentenced, I call to talk to my then wife and my kids, and I'm confronted with that. They took my jail phone calls and played it in the media then too. To let everybody know that I was leading a double life, and I was wrong. Of course, I was wrong. And
but to hit you when you're down already,
they did.
But you weren't really the KO, the knockout. You weren't really taking the knockout yet, right? Like you weren't coming to terms with the big picture of everything yet until you went to prison, right?
Well, I think I felt it all when I was sentenced to 4 years in prison. That moment of, oh my gosh, what am I going to do now? And that's when I got hit hard. And then
you didn't think that they would take your actual phone calls and put it on social media.
Yeah, and I did, and then that's what probably really did me in. But it really didn't do me in because you know what? I was honest and transparent about it, and I'm sorry for what I did, and I'm very apologetic, but I wasn't going to let it all defeat me because I still needed to be a father and a man. Like I said, I'm not going to be a coward. So then I was shipped off. They were going to find a place for me for protective custody. And my first 30 days, I was served in solitary confinement. I served in the hole. And yes. So, and it was interesting because it was during Christmas time. And at that time, I thought it was the worst thing ever for me. But I realized it was the best thing for me, guys. And I'll tell you why. I realized during that period of time, it was only me, myself, and I and my higher power. So that was a good time for me to figure out who Kyle Overmyer was going to be and if I was going to win this fight. And I decided I was going to. And I also realized isolation creates elevation in your mind. It truly does.
It does. I've been in isolation, not in prison, y'all. I ain't a prison girl yet.
Wait. Are we learning something about Emily?
Emily, don't say yeah.
I'll just tell you this: the lockdowns of 2020 for COVID, and I was going through. Will knows because Will and I have been friends for a long time, and he's been co-host for a long time too. I had an absolute struggle, and I don't think that I would have healed properly if I was able to go hang out with my girlfriends or anything like that. The lockdown made it to be a point where it was just me and God, and that was it.
Yeah.
And that's how it had to be for me to receive healing and see my mistakes, all that kind of stuff. If it was in any way else, I don't think I would have ever truly healed and understand all this trauma bond and all the stuff I went through. So isolation, I agree with you, Kyle, when you're saying that even though we hear you're saying this and it's like, oh my gosh, 30 days in the pen or like all by yourself, solitary, but it really truly does help.
Oh, it does. I mean, it was, there's no clock and there is pretty much darkness. The only time I knew what time it was to eat when I would hear those metal wheels roll on that concrete floor coming towards my cell. That's what triggered me, and there was so much time for me to start to work on me and envision and manifest who I am today, which so much of it has come to fruition. And like Pam talked about, I promised to come back, and that's what I'm doing now.
That's good.
I'm glad you're doing this as a sheriff too, because we don't have people like you in your positions that speak out a whole lot, if they mess up. So it was important to me. No, you're welcome. And so I did that time. They did take me to protective custody for a while. I was there for a while, and tell you the truth, everybody knew I was coming. It was such high profile. They knew I was coming. And as soon as I jumped off the bus, I got offered drugs. First one's on me. Next one's on you. And guess what I said? No, thanks. I'm good. And I went through my entire prison sentence with no drugs, no alcohol, no nothing. Did y'all hear that?
Yeah.
Did y'all hear the applause?
Yep.
Kyle, did you hear the applause?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have a sound machine thing that is I'm using it for the first time tonight, so I did an applause. So I can't hear it, but you all can. So
yeah,
okay.
and I'm going to tell you guys, there's more drugs in prison than there is in the streets. You know, I saw people
Absolutely.
smoking
Oh,
crack,
absolutely.
shooting heroin. There was, cell phones, everything. I knew the ins and outs because I was around it. And I served several months, in protective, and then I went to general population eventually.
Okay, go ahead, Will. I've talked enough.
Well, Kyle, one thing I wanted to ask is, okay, let's take things back a little bit, if we could. Looking back on things now, it really seems like it was more of the mental part of the job and what you witnessed and you experienced and you did in your short time. I mean, what you were able to do in that short time from being just a regular police officer to being a sheriff's officer. I mean, you did that in such a short amount of time. All those things happened, and and people lost their lives in whatever situation. Do you think there should be more of an emphasis on the mental health aspect when it comes to police officers when they're dealt with a very high stressful situation, such as being part of a shooting or things like that? I mean, what's your take on that now?
Absolutely. I think it's a big thing. And that's one of the things I do. I get out, speak with first responders and different organizations all the time. Think about it this way. Physical wounds, you can put a Band-Aid on. Mental wound, you can't. There's a huge difference. A mental wound is so far worse than a physical. A physical will heal. You'll heal. But the mental, how it's not tangible to touch. You gotta work on it every single day. And there's so much trauma and damage done to people. And if we really look at it to be successful or to overcome obstacles and struggles in life, you gotta be strong mentally. Think about it.
Yeah.
And to look back now, and I worked on myself mentally every day while I was incarcerated for 4 years. I look at those 4 years.
Kyle, how did you do that though? If somebody's watching this right now, they have a family member, or if they've gone through this themselves, what would you tell them what they need to work on every day mentally to help better their situation or find healing?
There's not really many programs in when you're incarcerated. I did whatever I could. There was a couple I went through, but I did a lot of writing. Therapy. That's therapy for me. Writing. Like right now I'm writing a book. And that'll be coming out at the end of the year. So I'm writing a book, and writing for me, I found was therapy. Journaling. I worked out a lot while I was in there as well. But I also took the time to understand all people. I would sit down and converse and almost interview why people did what they did and understand each culture is what I did. And I figured out while I was in there, I didn't learn from others, but I learned about others. It was a win-win that most of the people in there were not bad. They had addiction and mental health that they struggled with. That's what made them commit the crime. Yeah, there's, people that were, people that sexually assaulted, did things to kids. I'm not about that at all. Those guys weren't fixable.
Right.
But there were other good human beings that struggled. They had trauma. And you know what? And they ended up in that warehouse. They really did with me. So that's what I did. I journaled, I worked on myself, and I learned from each and every one of those individuals that I was incarcerated with and I lived with day by day to figure out who the hell Kyle Overmyer needed to be and how to get myself better. And that's what I did.
Yeah. What's the biggest, Kyle, if I could ask real quick, if you don't mind, Emily, what's the biggest thing that you maybe thought as a fallacy when it came to being in prison versus what you thought it was not being in there? You know what I'm saying? Your idea of what prison is as a sheriff, and then actually being in prison, you're like, oh shit, this is the reality of it. Yeah. This is what's going on. What's the biggest surprise to you that really caught you off guard?
I think, the programming in there needs to be more programming. You just have too much time. And, not every person can be like me because we're all different human beings. But I took the initiative. And a lot of people say I'm kind of an oddity. I didn't relapse. I did not. I didn't violate my parole after 6 months because the recidivism rate is so high. So.
Yes, it is.
I just realized, there's, you just go in there and you sit around, and you got to make the most of it is what you got to do. You lose your, kind of lose your identity. You're no longer Kyle Overmyer. My prison number is 692-183. I will always say that. That's very symbolic to me. And you become a number. You become a number in a population. There's 28 prisons in the state of Ohio, and there's almost 50,000 just in prisons, not county jails. So that's almost an entire county,
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So, Kyle, real quick, with your background and everything, being a sheriff and your struggles, how often do you think that our police department and our sheriff's department face these things? Because I mean, every week, every day, our community is apprehending these individuals, and they confiscate a lot of drugs, a lot. Where do those drugs go? Where does that stuff end up going? And how often do you think that our police force or sheriff, I don't know how you want to call it, county and city departments face the possibility of addiction?
I think it's more prevalent than I'm finding out, because the stigma, it's that damn stigma that so many people struggle with. And then now I'm on a mission to shatter the stigma, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And I think the stigma lies among, first responders, veterans, because we're supposed to be strong and protect and serve. We should not supposedly have the weakness, but the weakness has been found to be a disease.
It happens. I believe it's a choice in the beginning, but it becomes a disease eventually.
It does. Absolutely. I don't blame those doctors at all, because you know what? I chose to keep getting those prescriptions. I did it. It was on me. That's why I took full responsibility for all my actions, including, regardless of stealing the pills, infidelity, becoming an addict, lying, cheating, manipulating, hurt my family. I wasn't the victim. It was my family members and the ones around me that were the victim. I wasn't,
So what happens to the drugs that are confiscated from these
Those
stops?
are put in evidence and then eventually destroyed. There's an evident person.
How do they destroy them?
They burn them, incinerate them. That's what they do.
Yeah.
Is there a true fact behind that, though?
Yeah, there is. There is.
Okay.
You think sometimes people steal them? Absolutely. You don't think there's another Kyle Overmyer out there? There's thousands of them. And you know what? They're suffering in silence.
It is. They're
suffering in silence. There are other Kyle Overmyers.
Especially if they're like defunding the police and all this. I can't imagine the trauma that the police force in the sheriff county department face. A lot, especially Chicago, Philadelphia, all these major cities that have a lot of crime and gunshots and dealing with children. I cannot imagine what these individuals go through.
But
imagine making $40,000 a year getting shot at.
I know.
It's poverty level. It's poverty level, and unfortunately, there's so many men and women doing it. But we were trained that just brush it off. Just brush it off and move on and go home and turn it on and off. And you can't turn it on and off that off button when you see so much trauma on a daily basis. You can't. You really can't. Human beings weren't made for that.
Like I worked in trauma, ER, and urgent care in the hospital setting. I've seen a lot. And there's something about it. I can compartmentalize it, if that makes sense. Like, especially if it's adults. But when it comes to children, I can't. Like, I still have a hard time. And I have to, like, when I see something that reminds me of something, I'm like, push it out. Like, I pray and everything about it. Like, and I'm just, like, these bodies come to me in the situation. So we hear calls and come in, like, this is happening and all this kind of stuff. But you all might hear some of that, but you truly don't know what the story is until you get there. And you're still trying to figure it out. And especially if it deals with a young child, like, I don't know how you all process that stuff. I mean, it would make a lot of sense to me if a police officer or sheriff
I mean, think about
would
it this
have
way.
issues.
Yeah, I
Go
mean,
ahead,
think
George.
about it, Emily. Just exactly what you're saying right now. I mean, you're going from a situation where, like, oh yeah, we just had two guys shoot at each other. One got shot and he's dead. All right, so what are we gonna do after? Okay, let's go get something to drink. Let's go.
Right.
What do you do after that? What do you
That's
do?
not right. It's not normal. That's
not
why
normal.
there needs to be more emphasis on mental health.
We need to have
law
these
enforcement.
programs implemented
They do.
in training.
And that's why I continue to get out and speak about this and try to destigmatize and say it's okay to get, to get help. And
I
I
always
know-
wonder about like my son's in middle school. We've had a couple scares this past year, but like these school mass shootings or these mass shootings that's going on in different places, like what happens to the police force that show up on scene and try to what happens to them afterwards? What's going on with these people?
Right. No, I agree. I think that there should probably be some programming. There has to be some programming. If not, things like this is going to continue to happen, and it's going to ruin a lot of good men and women in our community.
Absolutely, I agree.
Allison says they also need to have more education and mental health support for our first responders. Yes, even like ambulance, firefighting. It runs in my family. My cousin's the chief of our fire department. They've gone to
any
scenes
kind
way
of
before the
first
police.
responder.
Yeah, any kind needs to have this. I totally agree. And I want to mention this, and I'm going to have we got about 5 more minutes with you, Kyle, and we can let you go. And obviously, this is going to be part 2. I need 2 hours. Radio, Michelle, if you're listening to me right now, here on 17.7 FM, I needed 2 hours.
Yeah, you probably need 2 hours with me because I didn't get to the end of the prison sentence yet. So
no, we haven't. But I have one question with you dealing with true crime, high profile cases. There is, and I've messaged you on Facebook about this, but Brian Kohberger out in Idaho. I have deep dived into these Idaho homicides a long time here, and I have found the people that own this building, own this house, and I've linked. I always say follow the money, but in this, well, it's kind of follow the money, but it's follow the drugs scene here. I almost believe that Brian Kohberger is not the person to blame in this. I think it is a drug ring, a heavy drug ring that deals with police officers, judges, and everything in this city. And they just Kohberger put it all together to he's the scapegoat in many aspects in my research. Now, do you think that's possible?
I don't know. I mean, I know bits and pieces about that case. I just saw even that they found that, the K-bar knife that he purchased on that they found at the crime scene was purchased on Amazon. I mean, it appears
that the K-bar knife here, that little sorority that they were all affiliated with they were having pictures during Halloween, doing like scary pictures and stuff. They had K-bar knives in Halloween pictures at that sorority or fraternity, not sorority, fraternity that Zaina and this other guy and Ethan that were both killed were at, and these were on social media. Now all that stuff has been taken down now, but there was K-bar knives at this fraternity party at Halloween.
Gotcha. Yeah,
I honestly think I'm not an investigator, but I think that this is a small community and it's a good old boy system. And if we really start digging into the drug trafficking, it's going to bring everybody down. Judges, cops, police, everything.
Oh, I think it definitely happens, Emily. I mean, we don't live in a perfect world. I mean, look at some of the stuff that's going on. Who would ever thought the sheriff would be a drug addict and goes to prison for 4 years? I mean, it happens. It happens. There is evil and deceit in about every area in life, and even the churches, you see,
Oh yeah, churches big time.
So
Will, I'll have you have a follow-up question with that, and then we'll ask Kyle where we can find you and
So
everything.
the day you get out, how does this all happen? What's your thoughts? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? I mean, who picks you up? How does this all happen?
well, ultimately, I went through a divorce while I was in there, got involved with someone else that fell through. But then ultimately, I found myself eventually homeless and frying chicken in my hometown for $9.50 an hour. I was back in my hometown. I was living, thank goodness. Deb, she gave me a spot just in her spare bedroom, and I had a place to live. I didn't want to put the burden on my parents, and my dad possessed firearms at the time. And I was frying chicken. A lot of people would come into my least famous recipe. Larry was gracious to get enough to give me a job. People came in, took pictures, made memes of me, and tried to continue to tear me down. And actually, it turned me up, is what it did. It made me even more driven. So I continued to work on myself, build a stronger relationship with my children, and ended up getting a job in a treatment facility, working midnight shift, making a little more money. And I started sharing my story on Facebook and be vulnerable. And everybody thinks it's a weakness, and it became a strength, almost like a powerful, like Popeye with the spinach. And I started sharing my story. November 22nd, I met my now wife, Jennifer. We got married 6 weeks later. And I was living up north, and she was living by Columbus. Within 6 days, I get a phone call getting an offer from a business development job down in Columbus to move down here. And then her and I then put together. Her and I put together. She came up with KO Addiction to go out and start sharing my story. And then I worked in business development for another company. And today I'm with Hickory Recovery, which we're going to open Hickory Behavioral Hospital here in Ohio. I'm a regional director.
Awesome.
And I continue to share my story. And like I said, writing a book. I got right now I have a sponsorship, Lancaster Police Athletics League. I'm working on a couple more sponsorships right now, and traveling around doing not only speaking, podcasts, and on here to be with amazing people like you to share my story.
WTFrick Live, everybody.
Yeah, and you know what? Hopefully, like they say, regardless what you do and what you say, you touch one person, it's all worth it.
That's right. That's right.
And it is worth it. And you're going to be you're going to be in the area. You're my area here soon too. Portsmouth, Ohio is like 20 minutes.
Now I'm going to be down there speaking at a big rally. Actually, for actually overdose and suicide. And I'm looking forward to that. I'll be in Dayton soon. It looks like I think I'm going to be flying to New York here soon to do another podcast. I'm going to be all over the place. I love to speak. I love to share my story, and my passion's people. That's my new drug of choice, helping people.
That's good. That's wonderful.
And real quick, I have your website up, but if anybody's listening to here right now on the radio 107.7 FM, we appreciate you can look up Kyle at www.koaddiction.org. And real quick, Kyle, if you don't mind, tell people that's listening or watching where else they can contact you.
You can message me on Facebook, LinkedIn. I return all messages. I even give out my number, 419-455-0793. I'm very personable. That's another thing. You got to stay humble. You really got to stay humble, because I always say what was given to you today can be taken away tomorrow. And you can't forget where you came from. I was once in a 6x9 cell, and you know what? I've got to keep that mindset. I still even wear the same Timberland boots I wore in prison to keep me grounded. You can't forget that stuff. You could easily turn. I was blessed to have a second chance, and I don't think God's got a third chance for me. So I got to stick with my second.
I don't know. I'm gonna say he still has a third chance, but you better. It's thin ice. It's thin ice.
From
and
here,
I'm thankful
I don't know.
I'm thankful that we. Oh, go ahead.
No,
So,
and from here, I've had, and I think you and I messaged back and forth. There's been some people that approached me about possibly running for
mhm.
public office again, since I've been on both sides.
Yeah, go
And
ahead.
I would work on the mental health aspect, throughout the country, and prison reform. That's what I really believe
Oh,
needs to
prison
be
reform
hit
needs
upon.
to happen big time,
There's
big
so many
time.
people
So,
There are so many people that feel like, you know what, just incarcerate them. I believe let's rehabilitate them, make them good, the good people, even better people. Don't throw them away. Do not throw them away. Everybody should have that second chance and to be recycled, so to speak.
That's right.
I agree with that. So thank you, Kyle. We're gonna let you go off here. I'm gonna be in touch with you. We're gonna have to do another show here, talk about the ins and outs of prison, what you learned from it, and everything, and the aftermath and children and stuff. And then also, I'd like to I love our sheriff. I voted for him, but we have a lot of drug issues going on in my area. So maybe give some information to him, possibly in how to help his colleagues and stuff that might be facing this stuff on the road. But you have an amazing testimony. I have no doubt that you've already touched a lot of people. You're going to touch a lot more. I can't wait to hear about your book. And we thank you. And thank you to William Steele from A&E's Inmate to Roommate that recommended you.
Yeah, William's a great guy, and to let you
Yeah.
know, I've been out for 3 years so far, so I got a lot
Yeah.
more to do yet. I would
Yeah,
say I'm on a
you-
5-year plan.
You're
There
still
you go.
puppy right now. So thank you, everybody. We'll let you go, and Will and I will close out the show. I'll be in touch with you. We're going to do another show.
All right, thanks,
Thank
guys.
you.
Thank you,
All right.
Kyle.
Take care.
Take care.
There we go. Kyle Overmyer. Woo woo. Corruption with
What a
inside the
story.
system. Corruption with the inside the system, which is absolutely happens. Like I'm not going to
Yes.
be naive about all of that. What
Mhm.
that's going on. I
But to
worry
come
about
back
our
from it,
local.
like how he did.
Yeah, to come back from it. And I worry about our local police officers here in my town because I live in the good old boy system. I've said that over and over and over. But for him to be able to go through it and have the nerve to talk about it,
Right.
it takes a lot
Right.
for somebody to talk about it. So I really,
Yes,
really
it does.
admire Kyle Overmyer. And he's close to home. Sandusky's like 4 hours, maybe 5 at the most from me in Ohio. Ohio, Kentucky, West Virginia is a
But the thing
triad
is, though,
of addiction.
but the thing is, Emily, you know what? It doesn't only happen in that area. It happens everywhere in every corner of the
Yep.
United States. Unfortunately,
So if you were a police officer, or if you work for the sheriff department and you have issues, reach out to Kyle. Like you don't have to tell us. You don't have to tell anybody. I believe that Kyle will keep it confidential for you. Like if you have issues and problems going on, please reach out to him. It's in our description. koaddiction.com or .org. I'm sorry. I believe it's .org. I believe it is. Yeah, it's .org. koaddiction.org. Please reach out to him. He's amazing, awesome. By the way, this is the 1-year anniversary of What the Frick Live coming back.
what? Really? 1 year?
1 year. 1 year.
Look at
You know,
that.
our first
Yeah.
show. Will Martinez wasn't with me when I first came back, but that's okay. I love Will.
Aw.
But my first show last June was Johnny. Oh my gosh, I just went blank. Oh my gosh, I just went blank.
1 year
Amber
ago,
Heard and Johnny Depp.
There we
Johnny
go.
Depp's doorman that smoked his vape and drank his Sprite or Mountain Dew or something went on his deposition because it was video. He was the first guest to come on What the Frick
Look at that. Look at that.
last year. So anyway, in the next coming weeks, we're gonna have some 1-year event stuff. We're gonna be doing giveaways because Will Martinez has merch too for Dark Fringe Radio.
Yeah. Look right here. I got one on right now. Look at that.
Dark Fringe Radio. So we're gonna do some giveaways. So please, everybody, go follow us on all the social media pages. If you're listening to this, it's in the description. It's also on the description on the radio. So we love you all. We thank you. Next week we're gonna be live here again with Stephen Kelly. Part 2. Will was not able to do part 1, but part 2. This is a nitty gritty. The children under the Getty Museum.
I've heard about this.
This is gonna be good. It's gonna be good. We're gonna get. And by the way, Stephen Kelly, if you're listening to this right now, he like put me down because he's like, you're not asking me very hard questions.
Don't worry. I'm on next week. Don't worry. I'm gonna put him on the hot seat next week. Come on.
I told him. I said, listen, Stephen, this is the first time we've ever even talked about this topic on What the Frick Live. I know a lot of stuff, but I think about my viewers first. So it was an introduction show with him. So part two,
things in.
we gotta ease things, especially if it's conspiracy.
Of course.
So thank you everybody for tuning in here on 17.7 FM New Orleans United Network. We love you all. We appreciate you all. What the Frick Live will be again live next week at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Please share this out. It helps our show. It helps our guests. It helps the network. We love y'all and have a wonderful, awesome, amazing weekend. See you next time.